Welcome on into the full court press. Jason Walker here. Eric Frandsen will be walking in momentarily here to join us on 106.9 FM, 1390 AM The Fan. Streaming online at 1069thefan.com and on the 1069 The Fan mobile app. And streaming online on YouTube. Make sure to check us out there. Subscribe to The Fan KLGN. Is the YouTube channel where we live stream our shows. So a lot of fun there. And Eric now joining us here has decided to join the party.
I'm here.
He's here. Nobody worry.
I feel like I need to yell because it's so loud in the building today. I've had to yell to talk to just about everybody.
Is it really that loud up there? It's been fine for me. Of course, I've been hanging out in the...
You've been tucked away in the back.
Yeah, I get to hang out in one of the studios.
The soundproof studio, if you like.
Basically, Eric's up there and suspiciously close to all of the different fumes. So I'm not sure if Eric is always in his right mind.
It's true.
Maybe we should make sure to schedule those drug tests for later. Some of those fumes that come through... even though you got the door closed, whenever we go to your office to show plan, I'm like, I feel like it's just not. This is not a lot of fun renovations, but
they're tearing out tile today, so it's noisy.
That's why
that
sounds like
loud.
a lot of fun.
Yeah.
If you want to text in any of your thoughts on today's topics, we're going to be going over signings for Utah State men's and women's basketball, new commits, recommits. And all of those things have been updated on my transfer tracker, which you can find on cashvalleydaily.com. Got to pull it up myself. You should be able to find a link to it on the front page under the spotlight section. If you can't find it there, you don't have to scroll too far down under the sports section. But the latest commits, there are some that are probably going to happen, but I'm waiting on official confirmation. But we'll go through all of that today. Pac-12 additions. There are a lot of additions coming through for several teams, some players that are committing that are leaving Pac-12 schools. So we'll get into some of those updates, what the rosters are kind of beginning to look like for some of the teams, as there are some teams that are getting close to about half of their roster for the upcoming season, or if you're Colorado State, like most of your roster. But a lot of the rest of the Pac-12 has some catching up to do. Then we've got stuff about NIL, how the costs are soaring, and then a eulogy on the Utah Jazz season. Complete with
thankfully it's over.
Exit interviews. I pulled audio from I think 3 different people: Will Hardy, Keontae George, and Lowry Markkanen. I think I was able to pull about 20-30 second clips, about 5 different clips. So we'll get to those in the second hour. Just kind of review what the heck happened with the season. So let's get right into it. We have a few texts coming in that kind of hold over from I think. A little bit from our topic yesterday. We were talking a lot about money and ticket sales and the whole Spectrum reseeding situation. Eric's still fighting off people, trying to defend his takes that it's not that big of a deal.
Let's go.
But 4475. Well, actually, let's see. There's a few texts here from 4475. Saying, listening to Monday's show on a podcast, I have to chime in on the Spectrum seating move. Jason is making a tempest in a teapot. The herd doesn't show up and do what they do because they have great seats. The herd does what it does because they are the herd. They are in it for the havoc they cause. They'll be as loud as ever, and the energy will be the same. If you want to say if you want things to stay the same as always, let's go back to the Mountain West Conference and live with the lower demands. We're trying to level up our program. That requires more cash. Things will change and it'll be for the better. You can't ask for us to improve and demand more respect from the nation and the NCAA without dealing with changes and more expensive everything. And saying, it appears my tickets are going up by 42%. My reaction was, welcome to the Pac-12, not crying about the school trying to take advantage of me. Eric, did you text this in?
What's that number again?
Yeah. I'll be honest, I didn't feel like I made a particularly big deal out of it. Because now I did talk about maybe the herd not showing up because they have great seats. That is something that I did say that 4475 is calling me out on, and I'm willing to be wrong about that. It's just that I'm kind of spitballing here about different things that can potentially negatively impact the way the herd is. I'm more inclined to think that it's more about the physics of it all is where you're potentially going to have a bigger impact. But I do think for a certain number of fans, the lower quality seats Like, is that the reason they show up? No, and 4475 is right about that. Will it have an impact on the number of fans that show up? I think it will. And again, my whole take here is I think there will be an impact. To me, I'm kind of sitting on the fence as to like how big that impact will be. You have people that are going all out on this is going to like ruin the herd, or I don't know if anybody's going quite that far, but like they're saying this going to have a big impact.
There's been a lot
of
doom and gloom.
Yeah, there's been that doom and gloom. And then there's Eric, who's, he was willing to split the herd up and didn't think it would impact the herd at all. But, he's obviously a lot more optimistic about the herd being essentially the same. And I'm kind of sitting in the middle about like, I feel like there is going to be some impact. The question is how much? And I don't really know if I can provide an answer. I can speculate. Like I said, I was spitballing all over the place on yesterday's show. Yeah. Different ways that it could have a massive impact or it could not be much of an impact. And so I'm kind of sitting there just trying to take in all these different theories and trying to parse them out. And I'm not really sure I've come up with an answer yet.
Well, are students fans of their basketball team?
Yeah.
Are they excited about the move to the Pac-12?
Yeah.
They will show up.
There we go.
They will take their seats. Are they as nice as they were? Some of them, no. No, they're not. But you still get to sit with other students. And if the students are fans of the Utah State Aggie men's basketball team and other programs, they will show up. I'm not saying you take advantage of them just because you can. That's not my point. My point is that they had to make a move. They had to maximize the venue better. And fans will still come. The students will still come. I have faith that the students will still come, that they will still be innovative, that they will still be creative, and they'll still be loud.
Yeah.
I believe in you, Herd. I believe in you, students.
We've got some more text. 5777 sending in a text. And let's put this off for a minute because I want to kind of dive into the latest recruiting news. And so we'll push that for like a segment or two down the line. We're going to get to NIL costs and stuff like that. So it'll be a little bit more fitting to pull up some of that data and some of the text on that subject. 2305 saying, let us know if the Aggies have signed any additional basketball players or rumors. We will definitely be getting into that.
Yeah.
9315 saying, no wonder Eric had not so many hot takes yesterday on USU. It was the fumes.
The fumes.
Yeah, Eric still
That's why
impacted on the fumes. 2982 and helping us lead into this topic as well, saying actually a couple texts saying, what do we think of the new big? He's talking about Sean Feltz, transfer from Snow College. Curious how his game will translate from JUCO to Pac-12 basketball. And then adding also, how would you rank Jacobson's portal performance so far? We are only a week in. It seems like we have to be patient for splashy commitments. I'll be honest, I don't know if Utah's like. It depends on where you draw the line on splashy commit, because there's splashy in like signing a guy who averaged like 20 points per game, either the Division I or JUCO level, and then there's splashy in that, when you re-sign Carson Templin, that made a splash, and there's a bit of niche appeal to that. You got to kind of understand like what kind of impact a player can have, even if statistically there are people who can ho-hum about it. Obviously, Aggie fans know full well what it meant. But say you signed a player with that statistical profile out of the portal, like, say, Will Hornseth. Is that a splashy portal hire? Depends. It really depends.
Yeah. TBD.
Yeah. So
to be determined.
Depending on where you draw your line on splashy commitments, you do need to be patient, partly because Utah State has just had its first weekend of hosting players. They hosted, I think, at least 2 transfers. I think maybe 3. And a couple of high school recruits. So somewhere in like the 3 to 6 range. I don't know if there was anybody, maybe it's 3 to 5. Something in that range as far as a mix of transfer recruits and high school recruits. They signed one of the high school recruits, Jordan Boyd, or at least a verbal commitment from him. And then got a verbal commitment from, they signed Will Hornseth and got a verbal commitment from Sean Feltz from Snow College. So that's their first weekend. And they got, 3 players out of it? Now you have maybe players. Yeah. We'll see if they visit later this week. We have Tyreek Coleman, the freshman, soon-to-be sophomore, point guard out of Illinois State. he's someone who's going to be coming in the middle of the week. So, yeah, there is some patience when it comes to more recruits because there's only so many you can get to visits, in a certain amount of time. And so there is going to be some patience. As far as how I would rank it so far, probably a solid C+, B-. Good additions. Are they
I put it as a B+ so far because the biggest things that were done happened before the portal really opened.
I guess I wasn't really counting that in my grade. I was thinking strictly of the players that he signed that almost feels low because usually people kind of default to B- versus in B.
Yeah, if we're just talking portal only.
Yeah, like
Will bringing in players outside of the 4 who already committed to stay.
Yeah, so Will Hornseth is a good addition. I've had a chance to watch a lot more film of him over the last few days. I'm going to have a transfer portal recruit breakdown article coming out. I'm hoping tomorrow. We'll see how things go. I'm kind of still cobbling together some aspects of the scouting aspect, but there's a lot of reason to like him. I'm more and more confident every day in his ability to fit with Carson Templin in the front court. Of course, an interesting thing now is the addition of Sean Feltz. I keep worrying in my head that I'm saying his name wrong. And his addition makes things interesting because now you have a very versatile or potentially versatile front court and a lot of different things you can do with it. Because you have, you can have 3, any kind of front court, but you kind of 3 main ones where you could have a smaller lineup where, say, Carson Templin or Will Hornseth lines up in the front court with Kingston Tosi. Or there's also Ben Schweiger, who's trying to get a waiver to play another year. If he gets another one, there's a decent likelihood that he ends up coming to Utah State. So
yeah.
And if he doesn't come, you'll probably get someone like him.
Someone of that archetype.
Yeah, 6'7", 6'8", stretch 4. So I'll use Schweiger and Kingston Tosi just as names. We know for sure one of those players is going to be on the team. But you could pair Carson Templin and Will Hornseth with that stretch 4. That's a bit of a small lineup, something we saw a lot of this year, like when Carson would play with Adlin Elamine. You could also have the Will Hornseth and Carson Templin front court. A little bit unique in that you don't see teams throwing out 2 small ball 5s very often, but we did see it with the Aggies last season.
Yep.
I did find a season actually that Ben Jacobson did it. It was back in 2017. He had 2 players that were kind of in that archetype where they were both kind of non-shooting, 6'7", 6'8". Well, I think one of them was 6'9". They were both 230 plus pounds. It was a season they did that. It wasn't one of their best offensive seasons. I don't think it was because of those 2 bigs. Though it was a good defensive season, which, as I think we talked about late last week, my biggest concern with Carson Templin and Will Hornseth isn't can they play offense together. I'm very confident they can play offense together, and spacing won't be really an issue. It's can they defend?
Yeah.
And again, as I've looked back, seen examples of Ben Jacobson's defense with that, with those 2 with that type of front court, and then just watching Will Hornseth tape again, I'm pretty confident that pairing could work. But then you have a couple of other different types of pairings. You could start Carson Templin alongside Sean Feltz, which I think we're probably fairly likely to see Sean Feltz start at center. Now, whether or not he plays 25, 30 minutes, I have my doubts about that. I think he'll play around 20 minutes per game, but he'll probably start. And then you can start him either next to a Carson Templin or Will Hornseth, or you could start him next to a Kingston Tosi, Ben Schweiger type, and then bring Carson Templin and Will Hornseth both off the bench. And even though they both come off the bench, they could both still play 25-ish minutes per game. So there's a bunch of different types of lineups. So I think I listed off 4 different types of lineups where they're varying degrees of, small to ultra big lineup where you're starting a 6'11", 6'8" guy versus one where you could start, a stretch 4 with a small ball 5. Or you could go super small ball and start Kingston and play Kingston Tosi at center. But while that is something they could do, I don't see a situation where that would come up.
Well, and we're still trying to figure out, Utah State is getting its big guys, kind of early on. We still don't really know what the guard lineup is going to look like, what the wing lineup looks like for Utah State. So naturally, we're already thinking of how do these bigs kind of work together. But it's nice to get the bigs like figured out early on, because those are
most expensive,
most expensive,
part of your
challenging players to really find and get them situated, and then going to figure out some of the other guards and wing players that you have available. So there's still work to be done, but Utah State looks like it is taking care of some of its size in the post. Now, Sean Feltz, experience-wise, not a ton of experience at this, certainly not at this level.
Not at this level. He has one season of being like a 15-ish minute per game center, and then last year he started like 22 of 30-something games and played about 22 minutes per game. Was very productive. So 22 minutes per game, and he averaged 13 points, 5.5 rebounds in 22. So he's playing half the game, and he's averaging 13 points per game.
Productive.
Yeah, productive. I think, especially on offense, his defense. I need to go watch more games because again, I've still only watched about 2/3 of one game, and I haven't been particularly impressed by his defense in that one game. But his offense, there is a lot to be happy about, especially where it can fit with Ben Jacobson's offense.
Yeah, and not really a meaty physical guy.
No, he's like 220 pounds, and he looks like it on the court.
Yeah, so I think Carson and Hornseth will need to take care of some of that. If Utah State faces a real physical big team, but that'll be interesting to see if that can be coached and improved with Sean Feltz. What he can do to improve.
Yeah. He's someone who's growing. He's getting older. He's going into his junior year.
Yeah,
we've seen guys
bodies maturing.
There's guys who are capable of adding 10, 20 pounds. And so I think if you get Sean Feltz up to about 235, that is a very workable weight where sure that you're going to meet guys that are like, 6'11 and 260 pounds. I mean, there's going to be one of those guys in your conference next year at the very least, Jeremiah Cherry, going to San Diego State, which he was at UNLV a couple years ago, right?
Oh, yeah, that's right, yeah.
If that name sounds familiar to any of you. So there will be guys that you run into, but, those guys are matchup problems for everybody because there's not a bunch of 260-pound guys rolling around. But you find ways to deal with them. Utah State faced Anton Bonk this year. It was like 7-2 and like 250, and they held him pretty well in that game. It wasn't a huge problem for the Aggies when they were facing him at Charlotte. So I think Sean Feltz will be a good addition. He's not going to be like a superstar all Pac-12, but I think there's things to like about him, and I think especially when he gets into the defense, I think he'll be a solid addition. 8632 on the Young Power Sports of Logan text line saying Xavier Zenz, a.k.a. ZZ Top, makes his decision as soon as tonight. Would be a huge get. Yeah, a guy who's a 3-star, kind of borderline 4-star, depending on who you ask, he might be a 4-star. Reports where he's going to make his decision today. Well, I'll maybe try and keep an eye on it, see if it happens during the show. I thought it would have happened by now. I expected to be announced, reporting on that news during our show, or knowing us, it'll happen like at 6:01. That's when it's going to happen.
Of course.
So it'll happen right when we get off our show, especially if he commits to Utah State. Of course, it would happen right as we get off our show. But yeah, we'll report on that as soon as we get the opportunity. 2947 says, tell us all about the guards. We need those. Yeah, they're working on getting some guards. They did add a high school player guard, Jordan Boyd, who I haven't really had a chance to watch much of outside of some highlight tape, some AAU highlight tape, which in my opinion is the absolute most annoying way to learn about a player, because not only is it just highlights, which have massive issues for just missing information, not getting the full picture.
Yeah.
And then it's AAU highlights where it's some guy filming, sometimes just with a smartphone, sometimes they got a professional camera, but it's just pointed at the guy. There's like 2 or 3 players in the way. They drive to the hoop. It pans up to show the ball going in, and then pan back to the guys who runs back down the court. And I don't mean this to make fun of the people who film that stuff. Those people are dedicated to the craft, and they put in a lot of work, and it's not like they choose to film from the baseline. That's where they have to do it, but it's hard for me to get anything watching AAU highlight tapes. So I don't know a ton about Jordan Boyd as a player just yet, but there's stuff to like. He's 6'4", athletic, and seems to have a shooting touch. But again, that's something that I'll have to kind of report on later. But yeah, as far as anything definitive beyond that, yeah, they haven't really. They've targeted some guards. There's a guy from Kent State who apparently they've shown interest in. I'll be honest, that player kind of terrifies me because it's a player that I think is a career 37% shooter. And that really does terrify me. Having a player that he averages 6.5 assists per game. I can't remember the gentleman's name, but yeah, he averages 10 points, 6.5 assists, but has some of the worst efficiency I've seen out of a point guard. And he's 3 years into his career, so it's not like a freshman being inefficient. So yeah, I'm kind of worried about that. I do like Tyreek Coleman. Efficient. I talk about efficiency a lot. I like to see efficiency, especially in guards. And Tyreek Coleman, I think, was 50% from the field, 40% from three, and 70% free throw line. And then good production for a freshman who's coming off the bench half the time. So I like him as a prospect, and we'll see what happens after his visit on about Thursday. But they very much seem to have been prioritizing the front court. That's where they've gotten a lot of the players. They've prioritized the front court with getting Will Hornseth, Carson Templin back in the fold, bringing in Sean Phelps. They're going after a wing and Xavier Zenz. And they may also be going after Ben Schweiger. We'll see how that whole situation works.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think they'll move on to the guards. And the good news is the guards actually tend to be a little more inexpensive.
There's a lot more of them.
Yeah, there's a lot more of them. And so this is kind of the cheaper end of the roster. So it's kind of good to spend the money that you have to, get the bigs that you need to get, and then focus on the guards. We need to take a break. We're a little overdue. We'll keep this going, talking about the newest recruits for men's basketball. We'll get to women's basketball as well as getting to the text line. There's a lot of text rolling in, so we'll get to those next here on the Full Court Press. Welcome back to the Full Court Press here with Jason Walker and Eric Frandsen, 106.9 FM, 1390 AM The Fan, and streaming online at 1069thefan.com and on the 1069 The Fan mobile app, and of course live on YouTube, The Fan KLGN, where you can watch us and not just listen to us. And 1818, kind of on that topic, just wanted to say I really enjoy the video access, guys. I hope it's providing more views and engagement for the show. I think it is. At least the analytics seem to indicate that it is.
Yeah, we've been curious to monitor how that would affect like the podcasts and things like that, but seems like it's everything is raising and everything's going up. So it's great. You love the interaction and the feedback.
Yeah. I'll always love, hearing from listeners and
even when you disagree with
even if you
takes.
disagree. Yeah, that's even when Eric is wrong or when I'm wrong. Whenever it happens, I'm always okay to be wrong. 5338 saying, is Feltz going to be just another big low skill player in the mode of a Zach Keller? Eric, I think you asked me the exact same question the other day.
Well, I didn't ask it quite like that, but
well, you asked him, would he be like Zach Keller? Like that's what stuck out to me.
There's some veiled shots there, but
is you? I didn't say it wasn't a veiled shot.
No,
it was
like 5338 says.
I guess low. Yeah, I wouldn't call him a low skill because, and again, especially on offense, he has. I don't think he has much of a post game. I didn't really see him do much post ups, but he has. He's a lob target. He's 6'11", decently athletic. Doesn't have a long wingspan. So no college actually lists the wingspans for most of their players. He's got a 6'11" wingspan for being 6'11". So he doesn't have super long arms. Well, relative to his frame, 6'11" is taller than anyone I know. Wingspan anyone I know, but. Yeah, he's got good skills. He's got great touch around the rim. He's got a 3-point shot. I think he made 14 3-pointers, and a lot of that was later in the season because when I looked at his game log, he wasn't shooting a whole lot earlier in the season. I'd have to go back and double check exactly where maybe a cutoff is, but I'd say most of those 3-pointers were the back half of the season. So by the end of the year, he was about 1 3-pointer every game, maybe skip every third game or so. Maybe he doesn't make one. So he's got a 3-point shot. He's not going to shoot the nets off, but like that kind of makes it interesting because it adds more spacing. That's where maybe he could start alongside a Will Hornseth, where instead of the power forward providing the spacing, it's the center who provides a little bit of spacing and a pick and roll target.
So of the big men that Utah State has had over the most recent history, is he closer to Isaac Johnson, Abin Gadarazzi, or Zach Keller, or somebody else that we've seen here recently in a Utah State uniform? It's
kind of a mix because maybe I was thinking more, like I brought this up to you, I thought it was more Abin Gadarazzi. Though as you bring up Isaac Johnson, I think there's probably a little more comparison to Isaac Johnson, especially with the 3-point shooting. Although Isaac Johnson was willing to rise and fire pretty much any time. Sean Feltz is not really going to be that. He would take about 1 3-point. Well,
yeah, Isaac Johnson was truly a stretch.
Yeah,
and Sean Feltz thinks like if he's there, if he's open, he'll take it.
Yeah, his 3-point.
It's not like you don't derive like offensive sets to just for him and draw out the opposing big man because your guy can shoot.
Yeah. So Sean Feltz's 3-point volume and efficiency is probably going to be more akin to Zach Keller. His physique is going to be a lot more like Isaac Johnson. And I think in the fact that Isaac Johnson was willing to take mid-range shots. I didn't see him take much of that kind of, 8 to 10 foot floater, but Sean Feltz does have that where he'll take that floater. He's got really good touch. And I'm sure I think in a few cases when he does post up, Feltz will probably use that kind of turnaround hook shot or kind of basically a floater, but the turnaround floater essentially that we call a hook shot these days. He probably uses that in the post when he needs to. And then I think he's going to be a good lob threat. And in that sense, he compares to Abin Gadarazzi. So he's kind of mixing and matching some of the traits of some recent Aggie centers to where he shares some similarities with each of them, but not any of them in their entirety. But if you had to go with just a one-off, who is he the closest to? It's probably Isaac Johnson. Just because of the fact that he has that ability to stretch the floor. He's willing to take mid-range shots. And he does share some of those weaknesses too, where he's not super bulky, and that can there are situations where that's obviously a negative.
Yeah. So it's a bit of a concern that he's somebody who could get pushed off his spot.
Yeah.
And would struggle moving somebody else defensively.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's the thing is being able to really hold your ground in the post. That's the biggest concern because Yeah, he doesn't have the bulk to really go toe-to-toe on offense in the post, but he has enough offensive skills beyond that. That's not really a concern. You got Will Hornseth, who's decent in the post. So you have a source of post offense. You don't need Sean Feltz to be doing, a lot of work in the post. That's not something the Aggies are going to need out of him. But the concern there is on defense, you do need that in a lot of cases, and we're going to have to see if he's capable of that.
Yeah.
Or is that going to limit his, can he play 20, 25 minutes? Or is that, lack of size, or maybe he can get bullied, is that going to limit him to maybe playing only 15 or so minutes? So we're seeing a range of possibilities from Sean Feltz based on how much he can stand his ground in the post on defense.
Another text coming in, 6391. USU basketball just started following Xavier Zenz on Instagram, so that seems promising.
It is weird how much you can kind of glean from, if you go to all the assistant coaches on social media and see who they're following. Obviously, official accounts, who are they following? So that's...
I don't know that I'd read too much into it.
You can read a little bit into it.
If it's a coach, that's one thing, but Utah State officially, USU basketball account,
that's a little bit more.
Then that seems to kick it up.
Because, the coaches are following literally anybody they're getting into contact with.
Right, that's a recruiting process. Right?
Yeah. But, the official accounts following him, that's a little bit closer.
Or maybe they're doing like us. They're just wanting to see what he announces. They're just waiting to see. They want to see it first.
So... if the social media accounts are following, that means that information has made it along to the SIDs and PR people, which, that's usually when the PR people are hearing about it, that's when it's pretty far along.
Yeah, that's true.
That's when you pretty much know when things are going to happen.
2982, do NIL valuations go down as the weeks go by? Meaning, are players more expensive now than what they will be in 2 weeks? That probably ends up just being a question of economics, because it's a fair question.
Because I would imagine they go down, but you have the initial push, which this is when your biggest high profile recruits are going on all their visits. These are all the people trying to go after their targets. There's bidding wars, different things like that.
So everybody's going after the best available players at the same time.
And then once you get past that initial wave where all the top of the line recruits are eventually committing, then you get to everyone who are going after their lower priority targets. Now, those guys just kind of are probably naturally going to be cheaper anyway. So I don't know if their valuations go down. It's just that they have lower valuations anyway. But then you're getting into supply and demand,
They may have overvalued themselves anyway.
Yeah, they could have overvalued themselves, so maybe they go down. Or you could have kind of a reverse of that, where a bunch of teams missed out on their primary targets, so they go into a bidding war for these lower priority targets who become their high priority targets because they missed out on the big ones. So you could have players that see an increase. There's a bunch of different ways that you can kind of form logical through lines on players' NIL valuations going down at this point or going up. But to me, I think you're just going to get into a range of players that were just going to be cheaper anyway, because they're not as high priority targets. And those players tend to be a little, they tend to be cheaper because of that.
Yeah. A couple texts coming in from 9315. Someone with lots of money needs to buy courtside seats and then donate them back to the herd so they can still be courtside. That would be a lot of money.
That'd be nice. Have a night where a bunch of the students get to sit in those courtside seats.
Also, big fish in the portal. I thought he was done.
Yeah, this was something that...
Isaac Johnson is in the portal, made an announcement on social media that he's transferring away from Hawaii. He is out of eligibility, but he did claim that he is filing an appeal. He plans to file an appeal to try to get a fifth year of eligibility.
So it basically stems from his freshman season, because he played as a true freshman at Oregon. And I can't remember if he was super public about this, about what all went on in Oregon. It wasn't anything super crazy, but his season in Oregon wasn't fun for him on a personal level. And I think there was some mental health attached to that. As part of why he came to Utah State, is he needed to find a familiar place, and help rediscover himself and find joy in basketball and life again. And so I imagine there's something tied to that, where again his time in Oregon was a bit of a struggle where maybe he would claim something because he only played 10 games as a freshman. So there's at least something worthy of an appeal that he can submit. I can't speak to the, how good of an appeal it would be.
Yeah.
I don't know the precedent and all that. And there's a bunch of stuff that'll be part of that appeal that is none of my business. My personal opinion is he's probably not going to get it. But again, that's just pure speculation.
A couple of the texts here from 9315. The little section they cut out of the herd because they can't be too close to the opposing team is a sneaky good section. We need to secretly plant some people in there to get in the heads of the opposing team, like Riley Jensen would be a good one because he understands that kind of stuff. Mental performance coach could really get in their heads.
It's just like a psychologist turning into a villain who knows how to get under your skin and is using their skills for evil instead of good.
In the very bad way.
Or just have a bunch of, this is the one where you get the season ticket holders and they just give their tickets to students.
Yeah.
So,
here, why don't you move up a few rows?
Yeah, just give the ticket to students. Say, here, you have a ticket to sit here. And then the people come and say, hey, students can't sit here. And like, look, I have a ticket. I paid for this ticket, or I have this ticket, even if they didn't necessarily pay for it. That's where you could just buy out, just have a donor buy out that section and give those ones to students, because those would be a little cheaper. They're not cheap, but they're probably cheaper than courtside.
1818 texting in. I just saw a listing on Twitter. Pretty solid source, you could say, but it says Mason Falslev is the 11th best shooting guard next season. Would you say he is the favorite for Pac preseason player of the year so far?
Him or Braden Huff, one of those two probably.
Yeah, Gonzaga's got some pretty good dudes.
Yeah, so but usually it's someone who's
Mason should be in the conversation.
Yeah, usually it's someone who's a returner, and obviously you got to have the history behind you. And really, there's only going to be a couple of players that I think are really good candidates for that. Braden Huff is one of them. Mason Falslev has an even better candidacy, being a reigning conference player of the year, obviously at Mountain West.
Yeah.
You can maybe throw Kyle Jorgensen into the conversation, but I think he's more of a preseason first team than like true preseason player of the year candidate. But you could throw his name into the conversation if you wanted to, if you wanted to throw a dark horse in there. But yeah, whether or not he's the favorite, it might depend on who you ask. But nobody's going to say he isn't a candidate.
Right.
So, and I think that's pretty good evidence for him.
Yeah. Then 8632, Oregon State is crushing it in the portal. Definitely the third best team in the conference if the new guy can coach and not just recruit.
Yeah, interesting work being done by Oregon State. And we've got to take a break, so we'll get some more details. But yeah, Oregon State with 3 incoming recruits already and some really solid players on paper. So we'll talk about that next here on Full Court Press. full court press. I forgot to hit the video to come back for the stream, so some of you might have missed that comeback real quick.
We're here.
I was having an argument with Eric during the break, and so we just about missed the bump music. Eric's like, we got to get back on the show.
That's a very short bump music on that one. Yeah.
So we've got some portal updates for the rest of the Pac-12. Utah State has had their own successes in bringing in some players. We talked about Sean Feltz and the impact he can have, where he's doing a lot of additions for the front court. And, well, he's probably the final major addition to the front court, where the Aggies have most of their top 3 players you're going to see playing in the front court. Carson Templin, Will Hornseth, and now Sean Feltz. We'll see who they add as far as stretch fours. That'll kind of be part of that conversation. They're working on adding guards. Xavier Zenz could be another wing that they add, high-profile recruit. We're, I think, getting close to when he's going to announce it. But, again, he's probably going to announce it at 6:01. So we'll announce it when we can. We'll maybe talk about it on the show if he announces it. But the text kind of leading into the break was talking about Oregon State. And while they have had a lot of players enter the portal, Eric, you were updating me on 3 different players who entered the portal just today that I've had to update on my little Google sheet that I have. You can find links to that on social media as well. But
I'm dropping in another right now.
Yeah, another that enter the portal or another that...
that's a committed.
Oh, that's committed.
Dennis Evans.
Oh, Dennis Evans committed to Oregon State?
Yes.
Oh, there we go. So 4 commits now. I think no other team that I know of has more than 2 aside from Oregon State. San Diego State has a couple. Utah State now has 2. And a few others have 1. But Oregon State picking up Jackson Rasmussen, averaged 13.5 points for Idaho, also 4.5 rebounds. They picked up Xavier Staten. I keep wanting to say Stanton, adding another N in there. Didn't play a whole lot at BYU. I think injury was in part of that. Only played 9 games, only had a handful of points, but was a top 40 recruit.
Big name, big guy. Didn't really do much for BYU,
but
he's for a new opportunity.
Yeah, someone with a lot of talent, a lot of size, at least a lot of length. And then Deshaun Gorey was one that I think came out last night or early this morning. Someone that I was kind of hoping Utah State might be able to go after. He's a 6'6" wing, 13, almost 14 points per game, 6 rebounds. Of course, if you look at conference play or kind of, this is a guy who's a freshman, so sometimes you kind of wash out the non-conference play because that's when he's getting adjusted. And once he kind of hit that point, he was averaging 16 or 17 points per game and about 6 to 7 rebounds. So, and he was averaging a few assists on the side. So he's a really nice all-around wing. And really the only thing he needed to do was just continue to improve his shooting, which he was doing during the season.
Yeah, that's a good offensive get for Oregon State.
Yeah, I think in versatility as well.
Yeah.
So that's a good pickup. And mind you, they got to fill out an entire roster. But they've got a lot of length that they're adding. A 6'7" wing, a 7' center. Dennis Evans, 7'2" center, who the Aggies obviously saw with. Of course, he struggled to be on the court. There are some things where he's got to work on other aspects of his game. He's a good shot blocker, but can he stay on the court, not foul? Can he finish around the rim? There are other aspects that he's got to work on. But he was a freshman last year.
Yeah.
So he's adjusting to college basketball. So, yeah, really good stuff from Oregon State. I know the texter was talking about them being the third best team. I think right now, are they the third best team? I don't know if I'd say that. I like these players, but if you say this is their top 4, and I stack,
they're ahead of San Diego State or Utah State?
Yeah, well, to me, you kind of have San Diego State and Gonzaga toward the top, mostly on principle of the strength of their program. Because if you just stack up what they have, they're a little bit behind as far as what they have on the roster right now. Though Gonzaga is bringing in some really good recruit. They've got 4 or 3 4-star recruits coming in as freshmen, and then and they've also got a guy like Braden Huff. They added a really solid transfer in Isaiah Harwell, who was a former 5-star recruit out of high school. Was a freshman for Houston last year in the rotation, but not super productive, but he's going to go to Gonzaga and likely see an increased role. So Gonzaga is likely going to be at the top, just kind of out of principle, because we know they can reload and rebuild. San Diego State's likely to be up there. Utah State with returning potentially the best player in the conference as of right now, and Carson Templin. You're seeing them up there. I think Colorado State's really underrated in where they're at right now. Like when I'm looking at teams right now, I did some calculations on returning production. Most of the Pac-12 peaks at like 25% of returning minutes, points, win shares, different things like that. Colorado State returns 58% of minutes, 60% of points, like a hair under 60%, 64% of rebounds, 44% of assists, 58% of three-pointers made, and then 61% of win shares.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're sleeping on the Rams, you're going to get stung.
Yeah, and they're returning a lot of players, and they're good players.
Yes.
Kerry Booth, Kyle Jorgensen. I'm suddenly spacing on everyone else's names. But they've got a lot of players to like. Jojo McIver's an up-and-coming guard. Josh Pasquarelli, Rashawn Mbemba. We have Kyle Jorgensen and Rashawn Mbemba who missed a lot of games due to injury, and Mbemba especially. So they're bringing a lot of these guys back. They have a good front court. They have good returners in the backcourt, some up-and-comers in the backcourt. They got some things to figure out on the wings because they lost some key wings, and they're going to have to bring in some. Either going to have some guys step up into bigger roles or bring in a transfer. Probably a bit of both. But I think you look at, so it's Gonzaga, in whatever order you want to put these in, I'm just going to list them off. But Gonzaga, San Diego State, Utah State, and Colorado State, I think are your top four. Whatever order you want to try and put in, but those are your top four. Oregon State, with some of the transfers they're adding, they're making
a case.
Yeah, they're doing a good job to put things together. For me, I don't know if I'd put them into that top four, mostly because of uncertainty. And the fact they are going to be replacing their whole roster, but you do have to acknowledge some of the good work they're doing in the portal with the caliber of players and the potential that some of these players have.
Yeah, at least making a showing that they're going to be much better than they were last year.
Yeah.
And take basketball a little bit more seriously. So, yeah, really interesting to see how they're putting their roster together, but just because they get a few good recruits does not a roster make.
Yeah.
But certainly it helps.
It helps. It helps.
It really helps.
Because Utah State's case for being at the top of the Mountain West is based pretty much solely off of returning two players.
Yeah.
Let's keep that in mind. The Aggies don't have a volume of players themselves, but they return two really key players, and that formulates obviously a really good base for them to be one of the top teams. So, but yeah, don't sleep on Oregon State, don't sleep on Colorado State, and obviously never sleep on Gonzaga, San Diego State, or Utah State. No matter what's going on. 6391, one more text before we hit a break, saying, was Evans the player from GCU that had a couple of goaltends?
Yes.
Yes, that was him.
Yes, he was.
That was indeed him. So
a few block shots that...
I think he had 5 block shots that he was credited for, 4 or 5 that he was credited for in that game. And
at least 2 of them
at least 2 of them were goaltends. We got to take a break. When we come back, we'll wrap up the first hour here on the Full Court Press.
Batteries, headlights, wiper blades, all in stock, on sale now at your local Napa Auto Parts. You know, we had some rain last week and over the weekend. How are your wiper blades? How do they hold up? And we got some more weather coming this way. So
we do have weather.
More rain.
happening.
Jason always likes to point fun at that. And colder temperatures too, by the way. So make sure you're prepared. Your vehicles are operating optimally for all that. Just go to Napa Auto Parts. On sale now. Lots of deals available from Preston to Providence.
Braden Clark on the YouTube chat asking if we talked about Deshaun Gorey, Utah State. I don't know when the timing of that came
Oregon
in.
State.
What did I say?
It'd
be
Oregon great State. If it was the Utah State.
Yeah, it'd be great at Utah State. Hopefully you sent that in. I didn't see when you sent it in. Hopefully you sent it in before we talked about it, because we have talked about Deshaun Gorey and kind of Oregon State's. They're doing pretty solid in transfer portal recruits so far.
But Jason, you found something about NIL. We've talked about the value of players. Evan Miyakawa, he's dived into this, and as we heard from Bronco Mendenhall for football, the valuations of players just keeps going up and up and up and up.
Yeah. So Evan Mia, he did a projection back in March. He said that he thought, based on the numbers that he ran and all the data he has, he's got a lot of data, and he provides resources for college coaches. So this is somebody who has access to that kind of information. He expected the NIL market to jump 33%. Well, he revisited that question recently, and he said, it's up 65%.
That is just ridiculous.
So his projections, as good as he often is at projecting, a lot of things that he tries, he's off. And to be honest, I kind of expected that. Mind you, this wasn't a numbers thing. It was just kind of a hunch, because I remember hearing Bronco Mendenhall 2 or 3 times the price for that he was expecting. So I was like, 33% sounds optimistically low for the increase. Again, that wasn't database. It was just kind of a hunch. And 65%, that's more akin to kind of what I was maybe expecting, where players are, the increase, the inflation of NIL, it just keeps happening and happening. It's a runaway train. But I think there is still room for the Aggies to catch up. If they're doubling or tripling their NIL, then they've caught up a little bit. They're ahead of inflation, and I think that's an important thing for the Aggies. We got to take a break here. It's the end of our first hour. Don't go away. We're going to maybe have a bit of overflow with this topic, but we'll also get into the Utah Jazz, eulogize their season. Welcome back in to the Full Court Press. Jason Walker here with Eric Frandsen. Second hour of the show on 106.9 FM, 1390 AM. The Fan, streaming online at 1069thefan.com and on the 1069 The Fan mobile app, and live on YouTube. The Fan at KLGN is where you can check us out. Subscribe to the channel. You can see video, obviously live video, and then obviously replays of our shows. Latest talk in Aggies, Cache Valley. We're getting to the Utah Jazz this hour as well, talking about their season and obviously how it went. And, well, it's a unique season to talk about, to say the very least. It's like how do you end up looking back on a season like this? How do you, going through the season was its own experience. And
yes,
it felt, because again, I don't necessarily, portray myself as a fan of Utah State. I kind of try and keep a professional relationship, but like, I don't shy away from being a fan of the Jazz. Sure, I may cover them on radio, but I'm a fan of the Jazz. And I felt like a terrible fan this year, and even to a degree, a terrible analyst, radio host when talking about the Jazz. Because I'd get to, watching a game, or we'd talk about what the Jazz did the last night, and I'd pull up the box score and say, I don't know who this player is that's on the team. I'm someone who used to be able to name off the entire roster of the Utah Jazz. I could list off, every player, where they went to college, their height, weight, wingspan. I could probably spitball what stats they were averaging that year, their shooting percentages. Like, that's the kind of, I've been that invested in the team before. And this year I have just, even though it's kind of part of my job, we cover the Jazz. This is the radio home of Jazz games up here in Cache Valley.
Yeah.
Where we carry those games from the Jazz radio network. And this season was just so uninteresting as far as what was actually happening on the court. I just completely tuned out.
It became uninteresting so early too. Like the last few years, we've understood Utah's trying to rebuild their roster and play their rebuild out through the draft and through the lottery. But in the first part of the year, a few years ago, they were an exciting team, and the mentality was, at that time, we're going to draft, or we're going to sign undervalued players. We're going to prop them up and feature them. We're going to basically buy low, sell high, so we can get future draft assets. And then they did that again the following year. And then once it gets to be midpoint of the season, then it's just, we don't want to try to win too many games. We've traded these players out before the deadline. And then we're going to go chase the draft and the lottery. But this year, from the very beginning of the season, almost, it felt like it didn't work for us last year, so we're going to suck even harder this year. And so it was really hard, because then, like you said, there was really no familiarity with this team. And there was sometimes you'd check in to see young players. How are they developing? Is Keontae George going to be a legitimate guy in the NBA? Will Cody Williams, will he figure it out? Is this Ace Bailey guy? Is he going to be something? So there were moments where you could kind of watch that and see how they were developing. But as the season continued to go on, they're playing with a bunch of G League guys and 10-day contract guys and two-way players. We didn't know who these guys are.
Yeah. And to me, that was the biggest thing that really took a toll on me, as far as just how this tank ended up affecting my fandom, my interest in following this team. Because there are people who are like super invested in the team. And so you signed this 10-day guy, and he goes for 25 points, and they're like, oh, is this guy part of the future? And I'm like, no, he isn't. You can tell he isn't. There's a reason he's not in the NBA. Like, this happened with Chris Dunn a few years ago, where people are like, is this guy part of the future of the Jazz? Like, no, he's a roster filler. And sure, the Jazz were able to revive his career to the point where Chris Dunn did get a contract, but it's with somebody else. Same thing happened with Kelly Olynyk, Simone Fontecchio. Every single two-way guy, 10-day contract, all these guys they added. They're not going to be sticking around with the Jazz because the Jazz are going to go, they're going to have their young players that, they at least like. Your Keontae George, Ace Bailey, Larry Markkanen's not young, but he's part of that core. Walker Kessler, now Jaren Jackson Jr. Those are the guys they're going to build around. They're going to build around them with veterans, with free agent signings. There are going to be some draft picks too. They're hoping to get a really good draft pick this upcoming season. But there was no getting excited about these players at the end of the season, because part of what has made tanking more bearable, say you're the Philadelphia 76ers circa 2013, at the beginning of the process. And mind you, that was pre-Joel Embiid, but you had a guy named Michael Carter-Williams who was a rookie who was putting up triple-doubles. He had a half a dozen of them, I think, as a rookie. And he was an exciting player. Now, things didn't end up working out. They ended up selling him for cheap, and that was just kind of how the process worked, is they would sell whatever players they had for cheap until I could get someone like Joel Embiid or Ben Simmons. Well, the early version of Ben Simmons, who was actually good. But you could, as a fan, tune in or at least follow the team if you weren't literally tuning in every game. I wanted to watch Keontae George, Ace Bailey. I want to see Lauri Markkanen. And, would have liked to see Walker Kessler, but obviously he's injured, so you're not going to see him out there on the court. But, see Jaren Jackson Jr. Even if the team was losing games and, you would want to see those players, even though the playoffs and the championship were not in the picture the entire year. Everyone knew that. Nobody was pretending they were a championship team. I don't think the Jazz themselves were pretending they were a championship team. They knew what they were. But by the end of the year, whoever was in charge of which players were available and which weren't, whether it's the coach or the front office, whoever is supposedly in charge there, all of the players that are part of the future that I want to watch, they weren't playing anymore. And so I just became so disconnected from the team that you just don't care anymore. And you basically tune out. You don't pay attention to the team. You don't pay attention to the players. You start forgetting names. And I forgot what Will Hardy sounds like. I was going back to watch the exit interviews. And again, we have a few of the clips. We might play a couple of them. But I was like, dang, I forgot what Will Hardy sounds like. I forgot what Keontae George sounds like. And it was just I've become completely disconnected from the team that I root for and that on some level I'm supposed to cover here, as a radio host, just because they essentially manufactured a disconnect between themselves and their fans by removing all of the interesting pieces of their team. Even when you're tanking, even when you're a bad team, bad teams can generate interest. That's the whole thing with tanking and with having young players in a youth movement. I remember back in that core four era with, Alec Burks and Gordon Hayward and Derek Favors and all those, I'd be tuned into all those games. I know they'd lose. I'd watch them lose. Yeah,
but we were invested in watching them grow as young players. We wanted to see how were they developing, how were they growing, because we could see a future path that they were on. But this year, we really didn't see much of that. Yeah, there were moments if you watch Ace Bailey, Isaiah Collier.
Well, there were moments this season
it was so inconsistent how they didn't play together.
Yeah.
You didn't have a core together at all.
The part of the season that I was most invested in was when Keontae George was out there proving all of his haters, myself included. I was in that group. He was proving me wrong.
Making a case for most improved player in the NBA.
I couldn't have been more happier during that part of the season where I find out I was wrong as heck about Keontae George and his potential. That was my favorite part of the season, was seeing what Keontae George was turning into. And by the end of the season, I was like, well, I don't care about watching anymore. I literally was tuning. We'd have shows get shortened and, back before we were doing the YouTube stream. And turns out Keontae George was, putting up a 20-piece by halftime. And I'd pull up the game because I was I want to watch Keontae George.
Yeah.
And by the end, who am I going to watch? This Mbang guy who's putting up 30. He put up like 30 in the regular season finale. The Jazz had 2 players have a triple-double in the same game.
Yeah, normally you'd be like, oh my gosh, this rarely happens. This is amazing. Stop the presses. Yeah. But it like barely slipped by anybody's notice.
The Jazz went like forever, like my entire lifetime, without having a regular season triple-double. And they've had, I think, 4 or 5 of them this year.
Yeah.
And
Nurk got a couple of them.
Yeah, he got like 2 or 3 in a row. They got, I think, 2 or 3 at the end of the season. Again, 2 in one game. In fact, we have stat and player later. I'm going to talk about triple doubles later when we do stat and player if we get around to that. But just the amount of I don't care that was somehow manufactured by the Utah Jazz. And maybe that's just my own, like, maybe I'm just a fair weather fan. But again, my interest wasn't dictated by whether or not the Jazz were going to lose or not. Because some of the times I've been most invested was the core 4 era when they sucked. And, at times throughout this tank, like there are aspects where I've been really invested. I'm really invested in watching Walker Kessler play, Keontae George's breakout year, Lauri Markkanen going from potential bust as like an 8th or 9th pick who was just meh, averaging like 13 points per game for the Bulls and the Cavs. He comes to the Utah Jazz and he's an all-star.
He's an all-star and he wins the most improved player award.
So even though the Jazz weren't what they were in the Donovan Mitchell-Gobert era, there are still things that I can get invested in as a fan. And, even as someone like me who can still be dedicated to a team that isn't winning, they managed to basically boot me out of the fandom for a minute, or, boot me out of the boat for a little bit, the fandom boat. I'm jumping back in for next season because they're about to now fully do a win now mode. But it's like everything about the season that I wanted to pay attention to and wanted to care about, by the end, they'd removed it.
So let's we'll hear from some of the players, but before we and the coach, but before we do that, I mean, there was ended up being like 20 guys on this roster. I mean, the roster just got so big because they kept signing guys to fill roster spots.
Let me see how many players Basketball Reference ended up recording stats.
Yeah, it's probably even more than that. But let's Jaren Jackson Jr., Walker Kessler, Lauri Markkanen. We're going to assume those guys will be back. Ace Bailey. Okay, you're going to keep those 4 guys. Anyone else on the roster that really Jazz, they really need to keep this guy. He may not be a starter, but he's a good rotation guy. Isaiah Collier, probably that. Keontae George, he's probably, I think you keep him in the mix. But beyond that,
so
Kyle Filipowski, I think he's a nice rotation piece off the bench.
I think I've come now. I don't know. Maybe I should see who's actually on the payroll, but I think I've got 9 players that I think pretty much all these guys should be on the roster. I think most of them will be on the roster because they're under contract. A lot of these guys are still on a rookie scale. Lauri Markkanen, obviously, Keontae George, Walker Kessler. Of course, we got to deal with restricted free agency with him, but I think he'll be back with the Jazz. Ace Bailey, obviously. John Conchar, actually. While he's not like a lock, but he's a solid player. Isaiah Collier, again, rookie scale contract. Jaren Jackson Jr., obviously. Bryce Sensabaugh, maybe not, but you like to have the bench, microwave scorer, and Bryce Sensabaugh is basically built for that role. Yeah. And then I like Kyle Filipowski. Now, he would probably see a drastic decrease in minutes where Walker Kessler and Jaren Jackson Jr. are taking up most of the center minutes. Filipowski may not really have much of a role next year and may end up going down in the G League just to get playing time, even though he's an NBA caliber player. We know he can play and have an impact, but he's not as good as Walker Kessler or Jaren Jackson Jr., and there's not room to put one of those guys at power forward because, well, that's where Lauri Markkanen is, and maybe one of your upcoming draft picks if you get lucky and draft a Boozer, or an AJ DeBonsa. So that's something that could be really tricky for Kyle Filipowski. But yeah, beyond that, everyone is expendable. Heck, again, a couple of the guys that I listed off are expendable. Conchar, Filipowski, even Sensabaugh, Collier, they're all expendable. But I kind of expect most of those, if all 9 of those were on the roster next season, I wouldn't be surprised. Although I would be surprised if fewer than 6 of those 9 that I listed off aren't on the roster. Partly because again, pretty much all these guys are under contract for next year.
Yeah, one thing, though, that was interesting with the exit interviews yesterday for the Utah Jazz, I don't know how many of those you got. But
I've got a few. I've got one where, because Will Hardy was asked about, like, was it a successful season?
Yeah, and he highlights the younger players, the inexperienced players, how they still approach the game and how they still approached trying to be competitive. So I think that's noteworthy.
Let's see if we can play the clip properly here.
Yeah, I think it was for sure a successful year for our group. I think we have a much better understanding now of who we are as a group in this moment. We have a better understanding now of some of our, really all of our players, in particular the young players. I think when we say young players, we're generally talking about the guys on their rookie scale contracts. I think we saw individual improvement from everybody. I think it helps us, again, have a better understanding of where we are as we look towards the future now. But also very proud of the way the team conducted themselves every day. They came to work. They took feedback. They really gelled as a group. Like, you guys were around our team a lot. We had an incredible spirit of the group this year. So overall, I thought it was certainly a success.
Yes, that was Will Hardy. And yeah, interesting talking about, calling it a successful season. And I guess it, in the eye of the beholder, I guess, which, like, for all the whining I just did about, not being able to engage in the season, I think that you can call this a successful season. Now, some of that may depend on their lottery luck in about a month from now. But if you were going to ask, what did the Jazz need to accomplish? They needed to set themselves up for, an upward trajectory. They needed to keep their draft pick and get it as high as possible and try and continue to develop their young guys. And were those explicitly their goals? I couldn't tell you. I have to imagine there's a lot of overlap in between my ideas and what they may have written on a whiteboard. But if you counted all those as the Jazz's goals, they check pretty much every box.
If you're a team that knows that you're not really in the playoff hunt, that you've got a high pick that you need to protect, then your goals shift. And so your goals this year were to really see what we have with our younger players. And the way to do that is to have your veteran guys out or have them extended minutes on the bench because of injury and recovery. And so Utah got a lot of tape on their young guys. And they've had the last season and a half, especially, they've been able to get some really, really good evaluation on what some of these young guys are and what they are not. And so they have a much better idea of who do we want to continue to invest in and who is it time to move off of.
Yeah. Because
this next season, they're pushing their chips in and they're going to try to be something very different than they have been the last 3 years.
Yeah. And so that's why I really hope that, they're able to make something out of this, because they had their goals and they accomplished it, but it was horrible in the moment. Being a fan, 6391 on the Young Power Sports Logan text line saying, "I'm the same way, Jason, and I honestly think my decreased interest is also related to my lack of interest in the NBA as a whole. Adam Silver has been a horrible commissioner." Yeah, because the NBA, they have their own problems. And then that was part of being a Jazz fan. The Jazz are back just trying to rebuild. And then all of a sudden, OKC and Adam Silver and all these other, suddenly taking aim at the Jazz, from, 9 blocks away with a sniper rifle. It's what are we doing? Why are we fielding shots? We're just trying to become a better team the way that everybody else has. So not only do we have
8 other teams that are trying to do the same thing.
So not only do we have to endure all the shenanigans the Jazz were putting up, removing exciting young players from the rotation that were the one thing that we were clinging to since we weren't stacking W's. But then we have the NBA piling on saying, oh, yeah, you're the problem. You're why the NBA sucks. Mind you, never mind the gambling scandals, the salary circumvention stuff. Giannis literally partnering with a gambling company and potentially, making money by fueling speculation on whether or not he was going to request a trade.
Yes.
Forget all of that crap. Today's segment on why the NBA is failing is brought to you by FanDuel. And it's the Jazz's fault because they're tanking. They're the only one who's ever tanked. Like, that added to all of it, beyond just what the Jazz were doing and how awful it can be to follow a tanking team. Tanking has gotten even less enjoyable because it used to just be, well, you play your young guys and you'll be bad enough. Well, now everybody has been escalating their tanking because the Jazz had to field the worst team possible. And mind you, they fielded, like when they played the Grizzlies the other night, that was probably one of the worst assembled Jazz teams in the history of their franchise. And they won by 46 points.
Won by more than 40, yes.
So they played like 7 guys in the entire rotation. So they had tired players who were on 10-day contracts, and they 50-pieced a team. Like, that's why I think when people talk about tanking being a problem, like, yeah, as much as tanking's always happened,
and that may cost them the number 4 or the number 5 pick.
Yeah, because
they ended up tied with Sacramento.
Yeah, Adam Silver is, I don't know if he can quite pull the shenanigans to do what I think he'll do, where he's going to make the 0.6% chance the Jazz would have to lose their pick if they're the number 5 lottery slot. I don't, can he get away with making a 0.6% chance happen? But he probably will for sure make them get to the number 5 pick anyway and just have those less odds.
2603 texting in, I'll be fine with this year if we can get a good draft pick and be pushing a 4 seed next year.
Yeah, that's and to me, I'm in the same boat there. Just and
I think for Jazz fans generally, most people have understood. Like, we get what the Jazz are trying to do as an organization. The hope was that last year was just going to be that year. They'd end up with Cooper Flagg, and then the rebuild happens, and they're all steam ahead. But it didn't happen. And so, the way that the NBA is, with their flattened odds, we got to go one more year of all of this. And so last year, everybody was like, okay, oh, man, it sucks they didn't get it. This year, it's like, we're really getting tired of this. Like, this is too much. So making that trade at midseason to get Jaren Jackson Jr., that signaled to everybody, hey, look, this is the last year. We are not going to do this anymore. We're going to get serious. We're going to put together a really good roster. Just got to hang with this for a few more months.
Yeah. I think, honestly, that's the thing. That is the biggest impact of the Jaren Jackson Jr. trade. He played 3 minutes restricted games, but to me, his biggest impact was just being on the roster and being that symbol, that light at the end of the tunnel saying,
yes,
this is it. We have reached the end of the tanking road. Come hell or high water, we're going full bore next year. And that is, that's obviously not the only reason they made that trade. But that side effect, to me, has been the thing that really gets me through. Because if they hadn't made that trade, I'd be sitting here being like, well, what's next season going to look like? If they don't get the lottery odds, do they tank for another season? I would have probably speculated they wouldn't, because Lauri Markkanen is a ticking clock of, how much longer of his prime he's got.
Yeah.
But if you didn't have a guy like Jaren Jackson Jr., like this offseason would have been bleak. And now there are a lot of people who are paying attention to what the Jazz can be. And now we've reached the end of the tanking portion. All that's left is the potential reward for tanking, the reason that we go through this crap, and the promise of they're going to push for win now. You can be fully excited about wins, and you can expect wins. And so that's something that's really nice. We are overdue for a break, so we're going to step aside. We'll come back. We've got some more topics to get through. Utah Mammoth, they're going to make the playoffs. They're in the playoffs guaranteed. They got one more game, I think,
big
in the
game
regular
tonight.
season. Yeah,
big game. Determine some things for them.
They have 2 more games, actually. The regular season finale
ends
is
on
on Thursday.
But a big game tonight
Yeah.
could determine a few things with where they sit in the playoff picture, if you will.
So we'll talk about a team you can actually root for that'll be in the playoffs, and who knows, maybe make some noise. We'll talk about that next here on the Full Court Press. Ready to shake things up, Cache Valley? Live Young Rentals is now open at Young Power Sports. Street bikes, side-by-sides, and watercraft for rental. Call 435-755-7111. Get out and go. It's 435-755-7111. They also sponsor our text line, the Young Power Sports Logan text line. A few more texts talking about the Utah Jazz and kind of the NBA in general. 6391 saying the NBA says too many teams are tanking. The response? Let's incentivize more teams to tank.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, flattening more lottery odds, saying there are more teams in the lottery, like up to 18 teams in the lottery, flattened odds for like the entire top 10. Like, yeah, that's not going to incentivize teams in the playoffs to tank.
Also, 8968, if any team can defy the odds and lose a draft pick, you can rely on the Jazz with help or not.
Yeah, it's frustrating there.
May 10th, that's the day.
Yeah, that's the day.
When they do the draft lottery.
We're probably going to live stream our reactions once again. Which was a hoot and a holler last time, watching the Jazz get the 5th pick.
Hey, I would like to move on to the Mammoth, but there was a clip from Keontae George. As we were talking, he is somebody who really did grow this year. He was legitimately in conversation as most improved player of the year. And even though there were a lot of things that weren't fun for fans really to watch, as we said earlier, this was a great opportunity for some of these young guys to get quality minutes, to really understand the NBA game, understand how to prepare and approach the game. And one of those guys who did have a nice season was Keontae George. And he talked about how this season provided a lot of growth for him.
I'll probably say mentally, obviously. I talk about it all the time working with Dr. Craig. And I think just the mental aspect, of my game has taken, the physical part to a whole nother level. So I just think I think while I was out there this year, having mental notes, proactive self-talk, just things like that, just to keep me in the game. There are times where maybe early in my career, I mean, it's still early, but, 2 years ago or a year ago, I may, lose myself throughout the game, even times this year. But I think every year, those certain little moments have, they've lessened. So I think for me, I think I took a big time jump as far as, my mental.
And yeah, so that's one of the things where like you think like, hey, where did he make the biggest jump? Because for me, I was always targeting like he's inefficient from the field, but as while sometimes the solution to shooting poorly is just get in the gym.
Yeah, but
there's a mental aspect of that too, where it's like sometimes you're just in your head, where you're a good shooter and you get it in your head that you're not. That whatever happens, there's things that can just go wrong in your head. We're humans. Every part of us can get injured, and that includes our brains and our psychology. But with his mentality, he's just taken another step where he is going to be one of the exciting young scorers. He could end up getting most improved player next year, with where he's going to actually play the full season and be a great scorer next year. And I think that's something that's really exciting to look forward to. And of course, one thing he was asked about was making the playoffs next year. And that's something that obviously,
that's the hope.
Yeah, that's the hope that everyone is targeting. So, and he was pretty confident that the Jazz could do that.
Do you think that this roster can make the playoffs?
For sure, it's no doubts about it. In my mind, I mean, when you look, on paper, we look phenomenal. We're big, have length, can shoot it, can get to the rim. We got multiple defensive guys that can protect the paint, protect the perimeter. So, I mean, when you look at us, we got, all the tools. So that's why I said earlier, I just, expect us to have, great team camaraderie. And like I said, as long as we have a common goal, everybody else will, will hit their individual goals or, whatever they want to achieve.
Yeah, so that's pretty confident. Now, Will Hardy, I won't play the clip. He was a lot more diplomatic about whether or not the Jazz would make the playoffs. But he did say he was glad that his players were pretty confident. I think there were multiple players who were asking, making the playoffs. Keontae was pretty vocal about it. And that needs to be the goal. Like
Absolutely.
20 teams make the playoffs. And so the Jazz need to be making the playoffs next year because it's so easy to make the playoffs in the NBA. At the very least, the play-in. And if it is the 10th spot in the play-in, I'm going to count that. It'll be on the low end of my hopes. But as who's one of the texters said, pushing a 4 seed, I hope they're doing that. But that is a pretty extreme jump to go from bottom of the West to, top
playing
of
for home court.
Yeah, toward the top of the West. So that's a jump that might be on the extreme, but that's what I want them to be gunning for. And so I like the confidence, and it's also fun because I would talk about having Jaren Jackson Jr. on the roster. The Jazz have provided that ray of hope. They didn't provide any of that for watching the team in March and April. They made it about the worst experience possible, but it was all in service toward, and they provided that light by making a trade that we can at least look forward to next year and be excited about that.
Yeah. Speaking of playoffs, the NHL playoffs
Speaking
are not
of being
that
excited too.
far away. Yes. This is the last week of the regular season. The Utah Mammoth, they play tonight against Winnipeg, the Jets. They have a game on Thursday. I forget who that's with. But it's
the St. Louis Blues.
The Blues. But so the Utah Mammoth they've qualified to go to the playoffs, but there's still things at stake here for the Utah Mammoth. So they want to secure that wild card 1 position, and they can do that tonight if they beat the Jets in any fashion, and if a few other things happen. So if the Ducks lose in regulation, or if the Kings lose to the Canucks in any fashion, or if the Mammoth get 1 point and the Kings lose in regulation. So there's a few things here. between getting the wild card 1 or the wild card 2. The Kings are right on their heels, but Utah wants to lock up that better position with the wild card 1, and they can do that tonight if a few things fall their way.
Yeah, basically they're 1 point ahead of the Kings, and they need to stay ahead of the Kings. Although, do they have a tiebreaker over them? What's the tiebreaker situation look like if they end up with the same number of points?
I'm not sure that, but the Kings will finish as wild card 2 if they lose in regulation, and the Ducks and Mammoth each get at least 1 point. So, but I don't know tiebreaker situations. This is according to the NHL, the different playoff scenarios for tonight, as coming down to the last days of the regular season here, and teams are still jockeying for position for where they will land as the Stanley Cup playoffs get started.
Yeah, and the Mammoth, they lost a bit of their mojo because they were needing to get some wins, and they needed some crucial wins to clinch that playoff spot. They did. And then in their 2 most recent games, they've lost, while the Kings are on a 5-game winning streak. So they're pushing on ahead. Of course, the Kings are weird because the Mammoth have 7 more wins than the Kings, but the Kings have made it to overtime like a ton. They have 19, or at least they've lost a lot in overtime. They have 19 overtime losses, which is 13 more than the Mammoth. That's 13 points. Although the Mammoth get 14 more points from all those extra wins. Although,
so if I'm reading this right, and those who really follow hockey, correct me where I'm wrong, because I'm sure I'll be wrong
Eric's just
somewhere.
assuming he's wrong somewhere.
But with the way I'm reading this, if the playoffs started today, Utah Mammoth would play the Las Vegas Golden Knights. And that's great. I mean, it's close. It's regional.
It's also a team that's not like, because
it's a team that's been good, but they've been slipping. They're not like impenetrable.
The Knights have 93 points on the season. The Mammoth have 90.
Yeah, they're pretty evenly matched.
Like they're at the top of the Pacific Division, and the Mammoth have a wild card spot. But the Central Division has 3 teams that are over 100 points, and the Mammoth are basically on par with all of the leaders of the Pacific Division. 93 points for the Knights, 91 for the Oilers, 90 for the Ducks, and the Mammoth have 90. So it's like the Central Division is kicking butt, whereas the Pacific Division is kind of weak.
Yes.
At least, well, relatively speaking. They're obviously great teams.
By the way, the Mammoth do own the first tiebreaker over the Kings.
Yeah.
So we were asking about that, and I've got some clarity on that.
Yeah, so we just need the Mammoth to not blow it. Like, get a win tonight. Like, last time there was one of these, win a game and all these other scenarios. Last time we were really keying in on that was a few games ago when they were, I think it was when they were playing. Were they playing the Oilers? I forget who they were playing, but they needed to get a win, and then for like the Ducks to beat somebody else, and all of that happened. And now we have another one of those scenarios where the Mammoth need to bounce back from 2 straight losses and get a win.
Yeah, and that's why this game tonight is so important, is if they get this win, things fall in their place to get that wild card 1 spot locked up. They play the Vegas Golden Knights, who aren't, that much higher above Utah Mammoth. That's definitely a series that you would like to have. Otherwise, you face the Colorado Avalanche in the first round. And that's
brutal.
A much more challenging matchup for Utah.
That is, they lead the entire NHL in points, standing points. Although probably pretty close to leading. They think they might lead the NHL, and they lead the NHL in goal differential too. Plus 95 on the season. Mammoth aren't doing too bad at plus 28, which is ahead of the Golden Knights and the Oilers, who are both in that Pacific Division. So it's ahead of one of the teams they could face in the playoffs. So that's a pretty solid matchup. And on that 5-3-3-8, saying I like the Mammoth playoff matchup against either Vegas or LA, and then saying against Edmonton, I'd be more nervous. I think that's because I think the Mammoth have like 1 win all time. I mean, it's 2 seasons, but like 1 win against the Oilers. So like, or on paper, maybe they're more even, but like the Oilers have kind of had Mammoth's number.
Yeah. Good program.
It wasn't only until like a week or so.
There,
it was like a week or so ago that the Mammoth got their first ever win against the Oilers. So that's one where, on paper maybe it looks good, but we'll see. And 5-3-3 saying, and they definitely don't want to be matched up with Colorado. Yes, do not like. No. I want the Mammoth to at least like have a competitive first round series. Like if they lose their first ever playoff series in like 6 or 7 games, that sucks and I kind of hate it. But it'll be at least somewhat understandable, especially where they're in the wild card and their first, run in the playoffs. But like I'd really like them to get to the second round. I'm not under any delusions they're going to be making the Stanley Cup Finals. There's a world in which maybe they make that magical run, but I don't really see it happening. But like, can we get to the second round? Can we have a series win by the Mammoth? That would be pretty amazing.
Playoff hockey is so fun.
Yeah.
If you've casually been watching or not, now is the time to start paying attention.
Yeah. I need Eric to find a way to give me a press pass to one of the games.
All we have to do is ask.
Maybe ask. See
as long
what
as you're
happens.
actually going to report on something.
That's true. I'll report on it. I'll go and I'll sit in the box and I won't cheer because I'm not allowed to when I cover those. But I don't know. They probably wouldn't. They may or may not. We'll see.
I don't know. For the Jazz, it was like, we're not going to give you a season credential, but if you come like to report on individual games, then we'll do it. Our friend Mitch Henline would do that periodically.
There we go. All right. We'll see. If you see me at a Jazz game or a Mammoth game, then it means they said yes. So we got to take a break. When we come back, we'll continue this conversation here on 106.9 FM, 1390 AM, The Fan.
So Birdie's Golf Lounge, you've been hearing us talk about it. They're at 650 North, 870 West in Logan, and they have leagues. They have competitions with national and local prizes. They have memberships available. Plus, you can do hourly public bookings available. So if you got like a party, you want to do a company retreat, or just have some fun there with your friends and your buddies, go take a look at it. Through April 30th, they have early birdies pricing of just $129 a month with no monthly contract before opening. Usually it's $259 a month. So jump on those early birdies pricing at Birdie's Golf Lounge. Again, 650 North, 870 West in Logan. A lot of great technology there to help improve your game at Birdie's Golf Lounge.
Saying company retreats, I think that means that we're doing something there, probably.
I recently saw the TV series Company Retreat, so I guess that's why it's on my mind.
Oh, I didn't know there's a TV series by that name.
It's hilarious. Not safe for kids, but it's hilarious.
Oh, in my innocent ears, I definitely can't watch that. We had a text on the Young Power Sports of Logan text line saying the Scott Gerard in his podcast today said they heard that the Pac-12 is looking to add maybe in basketball St. Mary's and Santa Clara as teams being possibilities. Yeah, I've heard St. Mary's a lot there. I've heard people who are really confident and people who would have at least some knowledge of this. They were really confident that St. Mary's is going to be added in basketball. I'd have to imagine that is less likely, given a lot of people have looked at Randy Bennett and seen him as kind of the fuel of the fire with St. Mary's, and now he's kind of seeing the writing on the wall, and he's left St. Mary's. And now, does that can we say that the program is definitely tied to the coach? Like when you look at Utah State, people thought that Utah State was Stu Morrill.
Yeah.
And that's proven to be wrong. And if you've got the resources, you can put together a good team. So does St. Mary's still have that? We'll see, I guess. Santa Clara, it's an interesting one because that is maybe the most underrated team in the West Coast Conference because of the resources that are believed to be there, and that are there, at least from the coach's opinion. If you remember, I've referenced these a couple of times, but when On3 did the rankings of the coaching jobs themselves in each of the conferences, and they polled the coaches in those conferences. In the West Coast Conference, Gonzaga came out 1, obviously. St. Mary's was 2, but number 3 was Santa Clara, at least if I'm remembering right. They were up towards the top. And they actually, in a lot of those articles, they would have these little okay, here's something interesting. What did maybe one of the coaches say about it? And one of those questions was well, why is Santa Clara so high? And it was so they got resources. So that is an interesting potential addition. I've not heard any real chatter about Santa Clara being a serious expansion target. I know there's a lot of chatter about adding basketball members, or at least kind of like one sport, or football or non-football, football only or non-football memberships. And so St. Mary's is the most popular option there. Santa Clara may be a bit underrated, but I think the Pac-12 is really going to be putting expansion on hold. I know
they've done expansion in soccer and wrestling,
but for all sports,
but for an entire you're bringing everything to the table.
Yeah, for a full member or everything. Either full member or in one of the revenue sports like football or men's basketball. As far as expansion in those spheres, I would expect there to be a pretty big pause. Now, I know John Canzano, every time he gets behind a mic, is speculating.
Yeah, he throws out a different name each time he turns on a podcast.
And a lot of Oregon State fans, will be parroting a lot of that and bringing up a bunch of ideas. But I would really expect Pac-12 expansion, at least in the major areas. Again, that's adding teams that are competing in either football or men's basketball, however it's organized specifically, whether they're football only or all sports except football. I would expect there to be a big slowdown because they don't need to add anybody. So the only people they're going to add are teams that are really adding value. Does St. Mary's bring value? I'm not 100% sure, because are they going to still
otherwise if they hadn't had the coaching change, we'd say sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But because there's a coaching change, then we're like, well,
yeah. Well,
how do they continue what Randy Bennett built?
There was even some hesitancy because of how, Randy Bennett's getting up there in age, what happens when he eventually retires. So you're looking at, when you're adding a team, you're looking at the long term, because you can't boot him out. Once they're in, they're in. So that's kind of the question with both Santa Clara and St. Mary's. Are they adding value? There is a question of that because Utah State, they add value. Colorado State adds value. Fresno State, all these teams add value that you're not 100% sure St. Mary's is because they don't bring in football money. And basketball, we're only mostly sure that they're still going to be solid.
St. Mary's basketball arena is, what, 3,500?
Yeah.
Santa Clara, I just looked it up, 4,500. I mean,
Gonzaga gets away with that 8,000 seat arena because they're Gonzaga.
Yeah.
And they're also double what these other two schools are.
Yeah, it's a smaller arena by otherwise Pac-12 standards, but they're much closer to where everybody else is.
Yeah.
And their product on the court just exceeds everybody else.
Yeah.
But Santa Clara, St. Mary's, I don't know that they really move the needle. I think if you want to add schools, the Pac-12 should look at a full member. And yeah, just because John Canzano whispers something in a podcast doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen.
Yeah.
He was all in on UNLV, and then all of a sudden he pivots, and now he's all in on New Mexico, and now 2 days later he's all in on Santa Clara and St. Mary's.
Well, this wasn't John Canzano. This was,
no, but that's usually where a lot of this is based.
935 saying in that podcast that you get more units, meaning more money, and possibly more in TV revenue. You're not getting much more, like really any, in TV revenue because of St. Mary's. Not a significant plus. And you're not getting that big of a plus in NCAA tournament units. Like, sure, you get something. Like
St. Mary's has been a good, respectable program, and they've been competitive. It's just there's some question about what that team's going to look like with the new coach and under new leadership.
And you're also talking about the revenue share for the media deal is already thinner than they were expecting, and you're going to split that even more ways. Is St. Mary's going to bring enough to the table to increase that for everyone?
To renegotiate and say, oh, you know what? We need to give you more because you bring more value to our already signed contract.
Yeah, and so I don't think any of that's happening. We got to take a break. When we come back, we'll wrap up the show here on the Full Court Press. Feel the love with Mountain Valley Heating and Air. Nominations are now open. Last year, they gave away 5 complete heating and air systems They gave them away to deserving families, and in 2026, Mountain Valley Heating and Air hopes to give away 10 complete systems. So go nominate someone today at mtnvalleyhvac.com. That's mtnvalleyhvac.com. Feel the love with Mountain Valley Heating and Air. So Eric, talked about this earlier. Stat that blew our mind. Players of the week. I don't think we have time to play the little fun bits.
Yeah.
The music embeds, but I teased having a stat. So let's start with that. Although Eric, do you have a stat? Did you prepare one?
I have one.
Okay.
Well, I had one.
Okay. So since I put you on the spot there, we didn't actually compare notes as to whether or not we fully prepared. It was kind of tentatively on the schedule, but I'll say mine since I teased mine. But it was about triple doubles. So in the Memphis Grizzlies Utah Jazz game that took place this past, I think, Sunday, it was Friday, I think. It was Friday. So the Jazz won 147-101, where is a bunch of players that nobody knows on both teams. The Grizzlies played 6 players the entire game. The Jazz played 7. There were 3 players who had triple doubles in this game. Technically, there was a quadruple double. Jemai Mashak had 13 points, 15 rebounds, 14 assists, and 10 turnovers for the dubious quadruple double, which is, I think David Robinson had one of those once.
Wow.
Where he had a quadruple double, but one of them was turnovers. So there's a triple double there from one of the Memphis Grizzlies players. 2 players from the Jazz had triple doubles. John Conchar had 11 points, 11 rebounds, 10 assists. And Bez Mbang had 27 points, 11 rebounds, 11 assists. And Conchar was within spitting distance of a 5x5 because he had 5 steals and 2 blocks.
Oh, wow.
But this game, this past Friday, was the first game in NBA history where 3 different players had a triple-double.
Wow. And it was like nobody cared.
Yeah. Nobody knows who
Otherwise,
any of these
it'd be
players
a big
are.
deal.
Like, this will be probably the only triple-double for all of these players. They all had them on the same game, and it's just going to be a trivia game where everyone's going to think, oh, it was a game where, like, LeBron, Jokic, and Russell, but like, you know, LeBron and Westbrook were teammates at one point. Like, it was Lakers-Nuggets games where LeBron, Russell Westbrook, and Nikola Jokic all got one. Or maybe it was one involving Jokic, Harden, and, I don't know, maybe Chris Paul or something like that. Like, that's where people are going to think. Like, they're going to think of this is kind of the prime era for triple doubles, where there's
best players in the NBA.
Yeah, a lot of them. Like, I mean, you had Oscar Robertson, who was able to get a bunch, and Chamberlain. I don't even know if they were counting assists back in his time, but like, you know, you were able to. You were in the prime era of triple doubles. You'd think one of these triple double artists would or you know, we'd have a few of them, but. No, it was 3 random guys. So, Eric, you have like 10 seconds to get your stat.
First season in NBA history with 8 teams with 55 or more losses.
Yeah, that's terrible.
That's bad.
That's so many
That's
teams
not
tanking.
good.
Anyway,
It's
that's
not
going to do
good.
it for us today. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure to tune in tomorrow.